Michael and his wife Taylor are just your everyday millennial couple raising their daughter Allison deep in the heart of Texas. After realizing they were broke and having a money fight on their honeymoon, they decided to create a plan to pay off over $61,000 in debt in just 16 months. They created Winning to Wealth in 2018 to help thousands of couples just like them save more money, pay off debt, and get started with investing. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and just talk money with you guys for sure.
We're happy to have you here.
I would love for you to share with our audience a little bit more about your own personal finance journey, what it looked like, any obstacles that you came across when you were paying off $61,000 in 16 months.
Yeah, so my wife and I, as was already mentioned, we had a big money fight on our honeymoon. And it was then where we sat down and had our first real money discussion and discovered that we were $61,000 in debt. We got on a plan, came back, and ultimately ended up paying that off in 16 months. However, that wasn't without some challenges. I mean, early on, Taylor wasn't, super gung-ho about the methods that I was proposing. So we had to kind of figure out a way that we could work together. And then also 8 months into the journey, I lost my job and I was unemployed for a few months. So we had that going against us. And then my wife also has an autoimmune disease. So the stress of just me not working and all of that caused her to go into a flare, and she missed a bunch of work. So it was not an easy journey for us, but through all of that, we pushed through. And like I said, we ultimately ended up paying off $61,000 in 16 months.
Wow, it was definitely quite a journey for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, just from looking through your site and all of your information, Lexi and I have been discussing about your dream session. So tell our audience about if they have no idea who you are and you and your wife's story, what was the dream session you and your wife had, and kind of what did that spark inside of you, inside of her?
Yeah, so when we came back from the honeymoon, like by the time we came back, I already had a budget, I already had a plan, and like I was ready to go. And so we get home and I'm trying to like show her this budget. I'm like, all right, this is what we got to do. No more eating out, no more this, no more that. And I'm cutting all this stuff. And she's like, wait, this is not making sense, which kind of threw me off because on the honeymoon, she was super excited about getting out of debt and getting on a budget and getting on a plan. And then we get back and it's time to implement this stuff. And there's all this resistance and tension now. And I just wasn't understanding. And so what I realized was that at that point, like I was fighting for a lifestyle of debt freedom, and I wanted to go towards, living life on our own terms and ultimately FIRE. Meanwhile, she was still kind of holding on to the things that really were a big part of our relationship, like going out to dinner all the time and travel. And those were things that I was cutting out. And so to her, it was like, well, this is the kind of thing, these are the kind of experiences that we built our relationship on, and you're just kind of throwing that away. And so the dream session came about because one day I just asked her, I was like, look, we're sending thousands of dollars a month to debt, like every single month. If we didn't have to do that, what would you want to do with that money? And so then she started thinking like, well, I'd love to travel to Europe all the time. I'd love to even stay there for maybe 6 months to a year. If when we have kids, I'd love to, explore being a stay-at-home mom if that's what I want to do. And she had just all these ideas of ways that we could utilize that money that weren't towards the debt. And I was like, that's what you have to realize is like, that's what we're going towards. That's our dream. And so let's work towards the dream. So then we shifted our mentality away from we're cutting this stuff out to get out of debt. We didn't even really think of it that way. It was like, we're making these lifestyle changes so that we can live our dream life. And so that's what pushed us through on those tough days where things got really hard.
We all know that financial differences can be tough in relationships. What advice can you give to someone who's in a relationship with someone else who has different financial habits than them?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to take a human approach. Like a lot of times the person who has the idea to change the finances comes at it like I did, like with spreadsheets and numbers and data. And that may work if you have a person who loves spreadsheets and data like I do. Like if my wife had come to me with that, it would have been like yes, okay, let's do this. Because that's just my language. I'm a nerd like that. But to her, it wasn't. It didn't make sense. It was just like, okay, like, what does this mean? What is cutting out the debt? What does all this stuff come together to do? Like, how does this make our lives better? And so it was getting her to understand that part of it. And maybe that's the conversation you have to where it's not so much about the numbers, but about what you're going towards and what you can do together once you're out of whatever situation that you're in.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, maybe along this journey, both men and women or whoever in the relationship can relate to that. So you talked about how after you paid off all of your debt, your marriage really grew tremendously from this whole process. Tell us how getting your finances sorted contributed to the growth of your marriage and where you and your wife are at today.
Yeah, I think, because our journey was so hard and so challenging, like, I mean, it felt like every month, like something was being thrown at us. It forced us to communicate because, again, early on, we had agreed that, okay, this is how we want to live our life. We want to have maximum flexibility. We want to be debt free. We want all this money we're sending to debt. We want to invest it. So we already knew kind of what we wanted to do. And so when those challenges came up, it was like we could communicate better. We were talking about, okay, how do we alter the plan in a way that works for us now that I've lost my job or now that you're sick and now that you're doing this? Okay, what do we need to do together? And so it just strengthened our communication. And so since that point, like, again, anything that comes up, whether it's finance or whether it's something else, we've already gone through that, and we can have just open and honest dialogue from the perspective of, hey, we're teammates. We've already gone through something difficult together. Like, if we could weather that, we can definitely get through whatever is happening now. And so it just drew us closer together. It strengthened the communication. And again, like I said, I'm grateful for every challenge that we experienced on the journey because it did. It made us closer together, and it made us better people as a result.
We love your podcast, Winning to Wealth, and the experts you have on it are super great. Would you have a specific conversation that stands out that you'd want to share with everyone?
It was an episode with Michelle Jackson of the Michelle is Money Hungry podcast. And it really resonated with me because of everything that's happening right now with the pandemic and all of that. And Michelle was able to pay off $60,000 worth of debt. She left her job and she became this full-time entrepreneur while she still had debt. And her philosophy was, look, I can work this job that's stressing me out, that's draining, that's exhausting for 10 years and reach fire, or I can create my own lane and do something that I enjoy every day, but that's enough to pay my bills. And so it's this kind of flipping the fire movement on its head a little bit and saying, well, I don't really want to wait 10 years to reach financial independence. I want to live my best life now while also being financially responsible. And so that was one that just really opened my eyes and kind of helped me see personal finance in a different light, because I was one of those fire enthusiasts. And ever since we've recorded that episode, it's been like, you know what? She's right about that. And the reason I brought up the pandemic is because, like, being here the last couple months, I was actually laid off in May. It's forced me to kind of sit down and reevaluate like how we want our life to look. And I realized, you know what, the most important thing to me is spending time with my family. And like, I don't have to have a $2 million net worth to spend time with my family. I can just make conscious decisions today that get me to that goal. And so that was a really impactful episode for me.
What would you say to someone watching right now that's on their own debt journey, paying off debt, whether they're a single individual or with their family? How would you speak to someone now and maybe give them some motivation, some courage, with everything going on in the world? What would you say to someone going through a similar situation as yours?
So on the podcast, I mean, we talk about debt-free journeys a lot. Like, a lot of my guests have paid off all their debt, or they're debt-free, or they're working towards their debt. And every single one of them has encountered some form of obstacle on the journey. And I think when you meet that obstacle and when you encounter that obstacle, how you respond to that is really what's going to determine the outcome. A lot of people get that obstacle and feel like, well, it's not meant for me to pay off debt. Other people view that as, you know what, this is why I'm going to succeed. That way, the next time something comes up and I'm debt free and I've got an emergency fund and they've got all these reasons that are going to propel them forward. So that would be my advice, is just to keep going. Don't get discouraged. Things are going to happen. And don't expect perfection of yourself. Every budget's not going to be perfect. You're not going to pay the same amount off every single month. Sometimes surprise expenses are going to happen. So let go of the perfectionism, really take time to enjoy the journey, celebrate the wins, but remain focused and keep pushing forward through those obstacles.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Michael. It was really great.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for having me.